Well, my seeds aren't doing that too well either, so, and my back's not doing well at all. So tonight we are looking at lasagna layering potentially as well, because that isn't as hard on the back as it should be. Well, my problem with my back is that I spent 18 hours digging over the weekend, and that wasn't clever, especially when you're not that fit. Anyway, so tonight we're looking at out in the garden, because we've started with sowing your seeds inside. Now we're going to move them out, because a couple of weeks' time you will be moving them out. It looks as though it might be a bit earlier than usual as well. So, but before you get your seeds and your seedlings out, we've got to look at getting ready for them. And that means looking at soil. Soil, soil, soil. I can't stress enough that soil is desperately important. And the better your soil, the better your crop's going to be. As we found out last year here, we started out with some absolutely abominable clay that was about that deep, and blessings on all the people who worked so hard to get some really good soil in here, and they did, and it was just a fantastic job. And I came in here about mid-July, and the plants were just absolutely flourishing, despite a very late start, despite grey day after grey day after grey day. But soil is desperately, desperately important. So that's going to be the gist of tonight. Okay, so why dig over your beds? You've got these beds and you think, right, it might be fine to just leave them. Well, there is a way of gardening called lasagna layering. And when I said to my husband last night, lasagna layering, he said, "Oh, I'm hungry." I said, no. You're not hungry for cardboard and organic matter and peat moss. Because he'd just been cursing me because I bought in a really dirty knife that had a whole lot of peat moss all over it, and he said, yuck. But for those of you who have beds already, for those of you who are coming back to this garden, you do need to do a certain amount of digging. Obviously, most of us have some weed growth. I've already got dandelions just about flowering. I've got coltsfoot flowering, which is a dandelion derivative with great big grey and beautiful leaves and a little yellow flower, well, a stalk about that long and a little yellow flower on top of it. Flowering happily, but boy, does it spread, right? You need to remove stone, if you've got stone. And I don't know, but I have an idea that stones migrate upwards.
Yes, they definitely do.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually they do. There is a scientific reason, because the soil around them is actually packing downwards, and the stones are migrating upwards. So we've got to get those stones out, and I've got a whole wheelbarrow load again. Mind you, it's gone from 6 wheelbarrow loads the first year to 1 this year, so things are improving. You need to remove last year's stalks, anything that's left from last year that hasn't yet decomposed, take it away. Especially after last year where we had all that disease and all those blights and all those other things. Those, if they are still in the ground, and if you're actually digging your stalks out now, take them away, because you might still have remnants of those diseases. So it's better to take it away and put in either peat moss or a compost rather than trying to dig in something that might be nasty. And the other thing is, maple leaves from last year, if they had that black tar spot on them, it's not very wise to use them unless they are completely rotted down, because that carries a disease called anthracnose, which is a fungal disease, and it will get into your plants. Okay, we also need to aerate the soil. Can't leave it to just the earthworms to do. Earthworms, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. If you've got them, look after them, feed them. They'll help you. But you do need to aerate your soil. If you're getting what's called plating, which is where the soil compacts too much, your stuff will not grow well. It won't have the space to develop its roots properly. So you need to aerate soil by digging it. Obviously, preparation for sowing new seed or transplanting. I grew, as a winter crop, I grew oats rather than winter rye. And the oats died in the frost, and it's now at a stage where I should be digging. Well, I have dug most of it in, but there were some chunks that were very, very big clods of oat root, and they would not break down very easily now. So I took them out, and I've put them in my compost heap. So dig in your compost, your peat moss, your fertilizers, whatever you want to dig in. It's not too late to dig in a bit of lime if you didn't do it in the fall. It's best to do lime in the fall, but if you need to lime to bring your acid soil back to 6 to 6.8, which is most of your vegetables, pH, which we'll talk about in a minute, you can lime now. You can put in your bone meal, your blood meal, those sort of things. And the compost that you made last year, ideal to put it in now. So why dig it? That's the reasons. Okay, let me try and get rid of this slideshow. Get rid of that. Oh, sorry, let me just go back to that and see if we can get double digging. Oh, bliss. Bliss not. But double digging, you do once only. Well, unless you've got really, really, really appalling soil, and you might do it every 5 years. But double digging is really going deep, and I mean going 2 foot deep. Because you need to take the top 12 inches, take them off, put them aside, dig the other bit, the other 12 inches below that, loosen it up, put your compost in there, because a lot of your roots actually go down between 8 to 16 inches. So they need that food. That's where your plant is going to get its food. And then you dig in your compost, your sod, which is the top grassy bit. We did that here last year. Instead of taking it off and making a heap out of it, we actually put it in the bottom of the holes, upside down, so that the grass can't grow. Well, the grass isn't supposed to grow back up again, but some of these really tough grasses can. And obviously, the decomposed grass will make a natural fertilizer in time. Again, double digging is really for clay soils, and it's trying to give you both aeration and good drainage. Because if your plants are sitting in a pool of water, they don't want to be in a swimming pool. They can't live in a swimming pool. The roots will rot. So you've got to make sure that you're getting good drainage and good aeration. And it breaks up hard, compacted soil, and obviously, again, you're removing weeds, roots. And I have a couple of old trees around one of the areas that I want to use. So it's a case of breaking up those roots as well. And obviously stone. So, but double digging is very hard work. So find a nice young friend who will come and help you do it. Especially when you're getting as grey haired as I am. I've just had my hair cut to get rid of the grey. Lasagna gardening, much easier for those of you who don't want to dig. Right, this is layering on top of the soil rather than actually digging it. To tell the absolute truth, I have only ever lasagnaed once, and I used some rather raw organic matter, and it all grew weeds, so be careful. I'm going to try it again this year, but it can be an absolute boon, but it can go horribly wrong. You're supposed to do it in the fall. That you can do it if you think you're going to have a good hot summer, but then you would have to use a lot of peat rather than organic matter. Yeah. So, layer 1 is either 6 sheets thick of wet newspaper or cardboard. Cardboard's better. This is straight
When
on.
you're making a new
Yeah,
garden?
yeah. Now, there are 2 theories about that. One is that you should actually clear everything away and just have bare earth. The other is that you can actually do it straight on top, so long as your grass isn't too thick. So, 6 sheets of wet newspaper or a couple of, well, a layer of cardboard. Layer 2 is peat moss, if you can get it. Well, you can get it easily enough here. Layer 3 is some sort of organic matter, probably leaves if you can get.
That's all I use is newspaper and leaves.
Newspaper and leaves. Leaf mold is the most wonderful compost.
And I have a lot.
Yeah. Well, if you've got access. The thing is, grab leaves now. Everybody's throwing them out. They're all tidying up their gardens, but it's a bit late, really, to start using leaves. Then you carry on layering and layering and layering. Some people say 8 inches minimum. Other people say 2 feet minimum. I'm thinking 2 foot deep. Golly, you know.
Chalk leaves.
Yeah,
Chop
chopped
the
leaves.
bottom and then
Yeah.
like thick.
Yeah, as thick as possible, but that's really for the fall, if you can. Then you need to edge it with something. It's a good idea to edge a lasagna layered bed, because otherwise, at the end, if it's that deep, it's going to start sort of overflowing. Like, I'm afraid I'm not a very good baker, and every time I try to make an icing, it goes too wet on me. It sort of splodges all over the cake and goes off onto the side of the plate. Well, lasagna layering will do the same. So, plant, mulch whatever you plant. But the thing is, with lasagna layering, especially if you're using peat and especially if you're using leaf mold, it's going to be acidic. So you're going to need to put it in a fair amount of horticultural lime. So that's something that we need to think about. Okay. So now, how do you think we're going to look at home soils and test, without spending $125 down at RPC getting a test, to see whether your soil you think is going to be reasonable? Well, there are 10 ways to check your soil to see whether it's going to be reasonable. You dig a hole 6 to 10 inches deep and have a look right at that bottom of that hole and see what your soil looks like. If it looks like yellow, dirty, grey, yellow clay, your roots are going to have a problem with it down there. So that's when you start double digging. Do you have a foot or so of loose, what they call tilth? Now, tilth is an agricultural word, actually, rather than a horticultural word. You need this loose, friable, wonderful soil, because that's what's going to cause the growth. And it needs to be nearly a foot deep, as I said. If you're going to grow parsnips, some of the longer carrots, and you're going to grow some of the long, deep-rooted, what else is there? Things like kohlrabi. You need, and celery, and things like that. You need, to let them have a roof. Now, is your soil workable? Now, to test, I said this a couple of weeks back, test your soil, and especially at the moment you can test it. Take a double handful, squash it together, open up. If it falls apart, it's too sandy. It's not, the water's just going to drain through it. If it crumbles when you start actually just sort of patting it, that's almost ideal. But if it's sticky and it's actually sticking to your hands and you've got a great big sort of muddy patch smeared, you've got too much clay. So those are the three sort of, the ideal is that it will actually just break apart in your hand if you sort of flick it. And that is ideal for planting. Now, I find that my soil is pretty well workable now, but I did put a lot of peat moss into it last year. The areas where I've put a lot of peat moss, I can work. The areas where I've got plain clay, I'm not even touching at the moment. It's still too wet. So, can you see any worms or other soil organisms? They're a bit difficult to see because most of them are microscopic, so you're not going to see too many of them. Take a square foot of soil about 5 inches deep, spread out some newspaper, split that up on the soil, on the newspaper, count your earthworms. If you've got at least 10, you've got wonderful soil. So it's, count your worms and count your blessings. Is there any plant residue in this soil? Can you actually see any traces of roots from last year's growth? Because that's important, because that means that you're getting a lot of organic matter. How vigorous are the new plants in your soil? Obviously, that's a little bit later in the season. How good is the root development of your plants? If you're prepared to sacrifice one or two of your plants, you can sort of go down the side and have a look and see how they're growing, but I don't like sacrificing my plants, so I can only tell that when I take them out at the end of the season. Now, the other thing is water filtration. This is the fact that you don't want a plate of water sitting underneath your roots, rotting them. So what you do is you dig a hole about 6 inches square, 6 inches deep, pour a litre of water into it, wait for it to drain away, then pour another litre of water into it, and if that drains away 1/2 inch to 1 inch within an hour, then you've got your drainage about right.